So hey all, I'm Krishna. I also work at StrongLoop, but today I'm going to be talking about process management, and there are lots of modules out there, so we'll be covering 3 of them. Right? So when you're developing your application and getting it out there, there's a couple of steps that you go through. The first one is you actually write your code. You then connect it to a bunch of databases and data sources in the back so that you can actually expose them out on REST APIs and such. You then have to build it. Building, in the case of Node, just involves making sure all of the dependencies are present. You can then deploy it, run it someplace, expose it out to the web, make sure that it's secure and managed. And at that point, people are hitting it. You get to monitor it, see how many people are hitting it, how much CPU and memory they're using and such. And depending on all of this analytical information, you collect all of that, go and improve your website or your API. So where does process management step in? So it really covers 3 of those circles. You want to make sure that all of your dependencies are there, you want to run it, and then you want to monitor it. Right? But Node ecosystem is growing and is growing every day. Right? Which ones do you actually use? So today I'm going to be walking you through 3 of them. Forever, PM2, and the StrongLoop set of tools that also do process management. So let's start off. We'll start with Forever. This is actually a pretty simple process management API. It gives you a bunch of commands which let you start your application in daemon mode, let you see what applications are running, and once you're done with it, you can stop it. You can, of course, restart it and do graceful restarts and stuff. But when you're running Forever, basically you can do Forever start, -- append says if there are any log files already, make sure to append to them and not overwrite them. The UID in this case is just a way of identifying your application. So if you have multiple applications running, different UIDs lets you see what's running. And then the final is the server.js file. In this case, of course, the build step itself is nothing but npm install to make sure that all of your dependencies are there. Everything is running locally out of the folder that you ran Forever from. Right? And once it's running, you can do a Forever list, which will give you a list of all of those applications. Hit it with curl or through the web browser, and once you're done, you can stop it. So if you're looking at Forever, that gives you, well, build step is easy. It doesn't really provide much there. npm does it for you. The deploy and scale, in this case, Forever doesn't have a cluster sort of mode, so it will really run your application once, which in the case of Node will occupy all of one CPU. So if you want, you can run it multiple times and write your own load balancer in front. As far as monitoring and analytics, again, not so much over here, but Forever is really meant to be a very simple, lightweight thing to do. Right? So let's go on to PM2. This is a much more featureful API. PM2 will let you do similar things to Forever. You can still start your application. And in this case, you can give a name and a number of instances. So you can say, okay, I don't want just one. I want you to start 4 copies of this. This will occupy 4 CPUs, right? 1 per process. And again, it uses Node cluster in the background, so it'll still expose it via one port, and you can hit that port using curl. This also gives you graceful restart and rolling restart is what I mean, and a couple other things as far as just running it locally. But the cool thing is this will allow you to run remotely. So when you want to run remotely, you would give it they call it the ecosystem JSON file. It has 2 sections. The first one says what you want to run. The second one says where you want to run it. Right? What you want to run, meaning your application, all of the parameters to it, any environment variables you want to set, any node command line arguments you want to pass, like debug ports and such. And then where you want to run it is the location of the remote server, the Git repository you want to pull from, and things like that. Okay, so after you When you deploy this, you're basically saying PM2 deploy, you give it the ecosystem, which specifies where, and then you tell it to update. Right? Update at this point will do an SSH over to the remote host and will update everything over there. This, of course, means that you have to set up your SSH keys, otherwise it's going to prompt you for password 10 times. And also means that you have to find some way of bundling all of your dependencies in your Git repository. So in StrongLoop tools, we actually provide a tool for this. It's called SLC build, which will do this for you. And so you can just use these two in combination to do that. Once you're running, of course, in this case, I didn't tell it to run in cluster mode, so it just started a single application there. But if you do cluster mode, it'll start multiple. And it also gives you the ability to, let's say you deployed 5 times and the 5th one is broken, you can actually revert back to a previous commit. So once you have your app there, the third part there was monitoring and analytics. So you can use keymetrics.io, and PM2 integrates with keymetrics.io. It'll push up metrics information based on CPU usage, memory usage. It'll actually do stack traces, so it'll capture stack traces and keep track of how many times it had to restart your process and a couple of things like that. And it also keeps tracks of your slowest routes. So if you had a REST API in which maybe your login API for some reason was acting really slow, you could maybe figure it out over there. So let's go back and compare. In this case, build, you needed to use an external tool. You use the StrongLoop tool in this case. It does give you local and it gives you remote deploy capability. It gives you the ability to scale on a single machine or on multiple machines. And it gives you basic metrics information. Key metrics, I think, is free for development, and you have to pay if you want production metrics, 24 hours or something like that for dev mode. Okay, so let's move on to the StrongLoop tool. So StrongLoop provides the same sort of PM tools, and to install StrongLoop, you just go in PM install StrongLoop, -G, of course. And there is a tool called StrongLoop PM, and StrongPM is similar to PM2 in the case. It does similar things. It lets you run your application in both locally and remotely. But the cool thing here is, so the first thing you would do here is go to your remote machine and do PM install. And this is for a production environment. So PM install will create either a systemd script or an upstart script for you. You don't have to write it by hand. So that way, even if the machine reboots, PM comes up. And after you have done that, then you can take a look. Of course, when you first started it, there was nothing installed over there. So you can do SLC deploy. So SLC deploy will then look at your local checkout, or if you weren't using Git, just your local copy of your application. And it will, if you were using Git, it looks for, by default, the deploy branch of your Git repository. And when you do a build, that's how you get that deploy branch. So once you do SLC deploy, it's pushed all of that code over, and the PM will then start running it. Right? And as you can see, once it's running, it actually started it in cluster mode. So you automatically get cluster support in this case. And you also get a remote API that you can interact with this. So if you wanted to manage 5 PMs, you could write a REST client that goes ahead, logs into the PM API and then restarts it or scales it. So in the case of PM, you can actually set a scale initially, which will say these are the number of processes to start when I first deploy. And let's say load increased, you can always go ahead and increase that scale. So you can start with 2, move up to 5, and up and down as you need. But of course, this is all the command line way of doing things. Around January of this year, we announced StrongLoop Arc, which is a visual way of doing the same thing. So This will provide you with visual tools, or IDE, if you want to think of it that way, to build your application, to deploy your application, and to in fact manage multiple PMs that you can deploy to. Right? So deploy to, in this case, it'll also let you restart and manage everything on those PMs. This, of course, this particular module is early access. It was announced yesterday. Yeah. Okay, so now you have your applications running up there. We actually collect monitoring and metrics as well. So in this case, the simple ones, so CPU, memory, and loop time is captured and displayed using the same Arc tool. And you can choose which process you're displaying this for. But in addition to this, we also capture MySQL and Mongo and a couple of other databases and data sources. So that's great. You have your local display, but what if you already had a tool out there? So you were using Graphite or using Splunk. We actually have integration with all of those tools as well. Not just limited to the StrongLoop set of tools. Okay, so you had all of this. You figured out that one of the processes had some bug in it. It was using up too much memory. What do you do next? Because I couldn't find it during development. It only manifests in production. Arc will let you find this, because you can go ahead and say, okay, for that process, give me a heap dump right now. And that will give you all of the objects that are in memory and how much they're using. Right? Similarly, you can also do CPU metrics. So it'll tell you what processes are running, how much CPU they're using. That's good. But there is the uncertainty principle, which says nothing, you can either know where it is, or what is it, momentum or location, right? So in this case, it never breaks when you're looking. So we have a tool called Watchdog. So Watchdog will basically keep an eye on your loop time. So it takes how much time each event loop takes to run. And depending on what threshold you set, if it goes beyond a certain limit, it'll actually capture the CPU snapshot for you. So this lets you actually, when something bad is happening, it will tell you what is happening. So we go back to our chart to see what's going on. We took care of build because StrongLoop provides the build tool. We took care of deploy and scale with PM2 and Arc. And we took care of monitoring, and actually much more detailed monitoring than a couple of the other tools out there. And this also lets you figure out when stuff breaks. But what about this little, there's that block there between the monitoring and the deploy, which says, okay, you have 5 servers set up, but you really need some sort of load balancer or a reverse proxy or something in front of it, because no one's going to hit each one of those servers individually. So along with managing all of these multiple servers, we actually had one more secret hidden out there, which is the top right corner. And what that is a way to let you integrate with an Nginx-based load balancer. So you can start, similar to how you started Strong PM, you would start up the Nginx manager, the Nginx controller, and add it as a load balancer over there. So what this does is anytime you add a new PM, or you stop a PM, or you start a PM, it'll actually update Nginx with that configuration. So it'll load balance for you. Okay. So that covers that little thing. Of course, this is all preview.
I think that's supposed to say StrongLoop at the top, that's in PM2, right?
Sorry?
The next slide.
Go to the next slide.
Yeah?
Top left.
Top left. Oh, it is supposed to say StrongLoop. Yes. Okay, ignore that. But yeah, that's my talk. So.